Are the New Orleans Pelicans fighting harder with Zion Williamson? And is Garrett Nussmeier the worst quarterback for LSU since Brandon Harris? We're talking about that and so much more today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome back to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in as always. And if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and follow us however you get it. Your podcast, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Go ahead and check us out anywhere, anytime that you can listen to us wherever you are. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. I want to start off on this Let Me Talk to You Tuesday, telling you about the New Orleans Pelicans. You know, they've been without Zion Williamson for the last week or so. And it's kind of convenient, right? Because you look at that early part of the season, they were getting whipped by everybody. Starting off the season, getting beat by 30 against the Boston Celtics. You get whipped by the Denver Nuggets, 122-88. You lose by 31 to the OKC Thunder. And then Zion Williamson's on a milk carton. He's down with a hamstring injury. And you wind up winning 2 games on a back-to-back right after. Seriously, you handle business against the Charlotte Hornets. And then you win a very tight game against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, that said, you did lose on Saturday over the weekend to the San Antonio Spurs. And at the time of this recording, they're down by 4 right now against the Phoenix Suns. But again, they've been a lot more competitive. It hasn't been belt to ass looking games. It's been fairly competitive. And sometimes that's all I want to see as a fan of basketball, is seeing a Pelicans team that at least looks halfway competitive. It's not just one-way traffic and it's just a complete ass whooping from the jump. Give me a Pelicans team that is competing against teams and, more importantly, getting wins on the board. Yes, you only have 2 wins on the season. You're DFL in the Western Conference. It's very early in the season. But the fact that this Pelicans team is playing better without the guy that everybody talks about as being this megastar, and you're seeing other guys step up in different roles. Derek Queen, or as I'm calling it, the Big Blizzard in the Big Blender, he has been pretty good to start this season off. The rookie, Jeremiah Fears, he's been getting better. Sadiq Bey has been a surprise as well. So there's some really good positives that this team has. It's just wrapped up in a little bit of a meh product. And that's been the biggest problem for the Pelicans for a while, is not being able to find their identity. And I think it's mainly because of Zion Williamson. Him being out the amount of time he's been out in his career, it's a concerning thing, especially the fact that you got him with the number 1 overall pick. And yes, I still think to this day, if that shoe doesn't blow out in the NCAA tournament game, I think we are talking about a very different player. He was a generational talent before that. After that, he became very injury prone and didn't necessarily look all that great when he did get on the court. And I'm hoping we get to see him get better and be able to play a lot more, because safe to say, when he's playing more, this team has a lot better of a chance to get to the postseason. It just feels like the game has kind of passed him by. And more importantly, there are younger guys in that locker room that are stepping up when needed. That's telling me that this team may very well finally be ready to move on from Zion Williamson. I know everybody's been wanting to think about that for years and worrying about that worst case scenario, but purely based off of what I've seen over the last week without Zion for an extended period of time, you are seeing, again, guys like Jeremiah Fears, like Jordan Poole, Derek Queen, Trey Murphy. These guys are looking better as a team on the whole, not the complete team that we expect to see, but it feels like they are competing a hell of a lot more on the court with this kind of game they're putting on. They are looking a lot better. again, it's a low bar to cross over getting 2 wins in the 2025 season in early November. It'd be a whole different thing if we start seeing this kind of cascade into some really good wins going into the months of January and February, heading into the All-Star break. If they do that, we are absolutely excited. But we need to see more than just blips on the radar, especially with this young team. There's guys out there that want to see this Pelicans team improve and get better, and more importantly, keep things at least somewhat competitive. Because I feel like we're tired of this Pelicans team being very mid. And I have to wonder if getting rid of Zion is that catalyst to be done with the BS and done with mediocrity, because Zion's his injury history tells me it's not going to pan out all that well down the road. I'm just intrigued to see what's going to happen. I definitely feel like it may be time for Zion to exit stage left. If not during the season, as you approach the trade deadline, I'd say after the season. Try and get that first round pick that you gave up back. Now, I want to flip over to LSU football, because I was thinking about this when talking about the LSU-Alabama game towards the end of yesterday's podcast. Is people were comparing, Garrett Nussmeier and saying, oh, he was going to be the next Joe Burrow. He's going to be the next Jaden Daniels. Yeah, about that. He was never that great, if we're being honest. Everything that I saw from him when he was filling in garbage time for Jaden Daniels, going into the season, I was like, everybody was hyped up about him, but I just wasn't necessarily sold on what I'm going to call him going forward, Nepo Nussmeier. And I think that he's held back this LSU offense for the last time. Again, based off of the body language, and I'm no expert on body language, but I could tell that one person, Frank Wilson, was pissed at him, and Garrett Nussmeier was wanting none of it. He was wanting none of the criticism that was valid. Like, trust me, this wasn't just Frank Wilson being mad because they're losing 20-9 against Alabama, losing against your biggest rival for the last time you're playing them, for a little bit at least, in terms of a year-to-year basis. So you're sitting there like, really? You're going to go ahead and have this Boudet face? Like, no, you ain't going to have that bob in, bro. Like, you got to realize you ain't it, Chief. Heading into the season, those injuries piled up. I think that definitely lays some blame on Brian Kelly. And also, the blame has to 100% lay on Joe Sloan, because that offense was absolute ass. You had this run game was virtually non-existent. And that's one of the biggest things you needed to have if you were LSU. I've said it time and again. LSU may have had some great dogs at wide receiver over the last decade plus. OBJ, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. We could go on and on, like shot for shot, with all these great wide receivers over the last 10 to 15 years. But you know why they were so great, even though the quarterback play was fair to middling until Joe Burrow came around? It's because you had a great run game. You've got to have a good balance of run and pass. Yes, they were running the ball a lot more in the contest, but this is the big but, is they weren't getting the job done within the run game. I'm serious. Go look at the stats right now and see the rankings for 2025 when it comes to rushing yards per game. On a national scale, rushing offense wise, LSU is ranked 127th this year. And you compare that to what you were just a year ago, you were 107th, not much better. And again, this is comparing an entire season worth of action versus about 3/4 of the season in action. Last year, you had 4.06 yards per carry. Now, this year, you're sitting at 3.62. So you dropped damn near half a yard per carry. And if we want to go further, in the Brian Kelly era, seeing your average, your yards per game, LSU 2 years ago was 11th. In the second year under Brian Kelly, they were 11th in the country in rushing yards. Yeah, they had 200 yards per game. This year, they've gone down to an anemic 101 yards per game on average. That is not winning you football games at all. And again, that's 9 games. That's 9 games versus a complete 12-game schedule, according to the stats that are out there amongst FBS teams. You're 127th. South Carolina has the worst run game in the SEC at 100.78 yards per game. Again, that's not winning you football. Bottom line, you will never win football games if you're playing like that. If you have that large of a deficit, you're playing in that kind of situation. Go look at some of the best teams in the country. JMU is a team that's probably going to have a solid case to potentially be that group of 5 entrant in the CFP. They have 232 yards per game on the ground. You see really good balance from some of these cats, from some of these people that you're up against. Alabama's surprisingly 120th, but at the same time, you look at a team like Texas A&M, they're 19th in the country, 204 yards rushing per game. I would love to see that, because then the passing game gets to be opened up a little bit more. But going back to what I was saying, I firmly believe that Garrett Nussmeier, purely in terms of just the comparisons that these two quarterbacks have over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, I think that we can agree that Garrett Nussmeier is probably the worst quarterback for LSU as a starter since Brandon Harris in his first year. Like, go back in your mind. I've talked about this a lot. Is when Brandon Harris came aboard, he had to fill in because of the whole Jordan Jefferson thing, him getting suspended, then eventually transfer over to be part of the Raging Cajuns program. And that definitely was an interesting time. I'll just go ahead and leave it at that. But in 2015, he was having to go in and be thrown pretty much into the fire right out of the gate as a freshman. And he just wasn't the same. He was not all that great. It wound up working out because he wound up moving on to Danny Etling the next season, and he was a lot more serviceable at the QB position. But Garrett Nussmeier, I feel like historically, if we were to put together a tier list of LSU quarterbacks throughout history, he's be going towards the bottom half. But if we're talking about since 2010, I think we could agree that Garrett Nussmeier is towards the bottom ranking alongside Brandon Harris in my mind. I would love to be proven wrong. I'd honestly just love to go back into the timeline and just kind of power rank a lot of those guys from the 2010s, because I feel like just in terms of starting quarterbacks, he's the one that doesn't stand out all that much in terms of what he was able to do. He did not look that great, and his career at LSU definitely left a lot to be desired. We'll wrap up the pod with some news that popped up, and we talked about this a lot on yesterday's podcast about the Louisiana Raging Cajuns Texas State game and what happened in the final moments of this game. Yeah, this is the last time Texas State and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns will be playing each other for the foreseeable future as the Bobcats are making a move over to the Pac-12. And the Sun Belt Conference announced a series of suspensions resulting from the incident at the conclusion of the game on Saturday. And Commissioner Keith Gill said in a statement presented by the Sun Belt Conference, quote, "There is no place for this type of behavior in college football. This unfortunate post-game incident overshadowed what was a competitive regional rivalry game on the field." He goes on to say, while the spirit of competition is central to what we do in college athletics, post-game actions like these will not be tolerated in the Sun Belt Conference. And following a review of the available footage, the Sun Belt has imposed suspension on 13 total players. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You had 6 from Texas State, and then you had 7 total for the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, namely Tyree Skipper. He's suspended for the remainder of the 2025 season. And that one at first was like a real head scratcher, but then I had to go back and look at the footage that I was able to see. And it's justified because you cannot be throwing a helmet or swinging a helmet at somebody. That's not the way you're going to do things. I don't know if anybody necessarily remembers the incident a number of years ago. I believe it was during I'm trying to remember what this exactly was. I think it was a Browns game where there was just an assault pretty much on the field. I think it was like 2015, 2016. Just a absolutely horrible, decision to be made where a guy just grabs his helmet and swings it at a guy. This isn't like Kyle Turley throwing his helmet into the air. No, throwing it swinging at a player. That is pretty much assault with a deadly weapon. That's not the way you want to do things. So Tyree Skipper, he is out for the remainder of the 2025 season, as well as any potential bowl game. You also had Cortland Flowers, Cody Jackson, Khalif Edwards, Colin Jacob, Evan Stroman, and D'Antonio Lasor. All those guys are suspended for 1 game. Now, Evan Stroman, number 84, again, this is purely based off of stuff I talked about on the pod yesterday, and it's all alleged. Nothing is official. Nothing was said. In fact, after this press release came out, the Sun Belt Conference basically said this is all we're talking about, no further comment. Because there were rumors that I think it was number 84 that he allegedly, we're going to emphasize that statement in case people are listening and catch us out of context, but allegedly number 84 for the Cajuns did storm the Texas State locker room. That resulted in the police more or less escorting the Bobcats out the door, and they made the quick trip over back to San Marcos. I say quick, I think it's about a 6-hour drive from here to San Marcos. Meanwhile, Texas State, number 0, Tamir Jackson, he took the brunt of the punishment, but I don't feel like that fit the crime. I feel like he should have been given the same suspension and told that he's done for the remainder of the 2025 season. They're not going to get to a bowl game, but he should have been suspended for the last 3 games of the season. That's my hot take. Simply because of the fact that if he was really the instigator in all of this. He's the one that started the heat. Like, you go back to the penultimate play of the game. The archives are up on demand right now on ESPN. You can go check it out if you have ESPN Plus. But there is, honest to God, footage within minutes, the final minute of the game, when the Cajuns are in victory formation, ready to get on out of here after a very hard-fought final moments of this game. Tamir Jackson swings at a player and damn near causes a mini riot then. That's not a great look overall. They call a penalty. Number 0 gets penalized 15 yards. I think the referee should have thrown him out the building. Should have ejected him, because that's not the way you play ball. I'm sorry. I understand that, I think it's too unsportsmanlike, so you get Das Boot. They should have just wasted very little time and said, hey, you're out of here because we don't want you to cause any further ruckus. Lo and behold, there was even more ruckus after the game. And it was kind of wild to see because it just happened out of nowhere. If you were watching back on the broadcast, in fact, they took a commercial break because they didn't want to show all that stuff, which is justified. But my goodness, because it was literally as soon as the final kneel down happened, everybody's dapping up, hugging, saying, hey, good game, good game. Then you wind up seeing number 0. He's upset at himself. He's upset that the team lost. He's justified in his frustration, but he's the only one I really didn't see dapping up. Like, just dap up, say GG's, and head on out the door. But no, I think he re-instigated. Again, when you have that many people around, I'm not going through this thing like a Zapruder film. I don't have, a binocular looking at every single person involved in that. But I feel like, just purely based off of what happened in the game itself, I think Tamir Jackson probably exacerbated the situation even more. So I think he should be given Das Boot and suspended for the rest of the season as well, simply because of what happened there. They've got 3 more games left against Southern Miss and the Warhawks, so he'll be out for those games, but I think he should be out for the South Alabama game as well. Just because I feel like he's the one that instigated this entire domino effect, and he should be held accountable just as much as Tyree Skipper is being held accountable for his actions. His actions were justified. As a person who's covering this team, completely non-biased, Tyree Skipper shouldn't have done that, number 1. And number 2, he's paying his debt in this sense. What we saw from Tamir Jackson, the 2 games, I can understand, but I still will call total and complete BS on. Other players got suspended. All of them are 1 games. Kamari Terrell, Justin DeLeon, Kyron Borda, JP Dieter, and Deverick Woods for the Bobcats. But looking back at the Cajuns, you have, a lot of those guys were on the defensive side of the ball. So not only do you lose Tyree Skipper, who had been a really good player on defense in that secondary, now you don't have a bunch of other guys that are going to be out for the next 2 games. You've got a little bit of extended bye week. You kind of get to see what your program can do. Cajuns football can step up in a big way. The next game is going to be on November 20th, and then wrap up against the Warhawks of UL Monroe. Those 2 teams are towards the bottom of the barrel, but I think Arkansas State is a little bit better than, UL Monroe. I think there's a clear line of demarcation. Yes. And again, Arkansas State's a little bit better than what I expected him to be heading into the season. They beat Texas State back in early October, 31-30. They have won, 4 of the last 5, losing to Southern Miss. So there's a chance. Again, this is the Cajuns quite literally fighting for a shot, an opportunity to win, to get into a bowl game. And I think if you get in a bowl game, most everybody is going to be content. I think everybody still wanted this team to be 9-3, 10-2. I feel like everybody's expectations were way too high. So it'll be intriguing to see what happens with the Vermilion and White on that Thursday night game. And we'll talk about that as well as so much more as we get closer to game day. Always fun, those Thursday night games. Glad I don't have to deal with that here at Cajun Field this year. It's been a minute since we've had those. And honestly, I'm good if we don't have another Thursday night game ever again at Cajun Field. But I digress. Appreciate you listening in to today's edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back with you tomorrow with another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to us today over at wherever you get your podcast from, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Just go ahead and follow us today. That way you don't miss a thing.